The first time my son called me a leech, I thought I had heard him wrong. We were sitting around the kitchen table, in the house I had bought 32 years earlier. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, stood near the counter with her arms folded while my son, Daniel, stared at his phone as if the conversation had nothing to do with him. "You can't keep living off us forever," Vanessa said. I looked at her in confusion. "Living off you," she gave a short, bitter laugh. "You know exactly what I mean. We pay for groceries, utilities, repairs. You're always here, always needing something. It feels like you're a leech." The word hung in the room. A leech for years. I had paid their mortgage. When Daniel lost his job, I covered Vanessa's college loans. Because she said the debt was ruining their future. I paid for their daughter's daycare, their vacations, their car repairs, and even the down payment on the house they now called their own. And yet somehow I was the burden. I slowly placed my coffee cup on the table. "You think I live off you?" I asked. Daniel finally looked up. "Mom, don't make this dramatic. We're just saying things need to change." "What exactly needs to change?" "You need to become more independent," Vanessa replied. "We have our own family to support." I looked around the kitchen, the cabinets, the appliances, the dining table. Everything had been purchased with money from me. Even the house belonged to me. Daniel and Vanessa had moved in after their financial problems began, and I had allowed them to stay because I believed family helped family. But over time, they had started treating my home like theirs. They changed the locks without asking. They redecorated the living room. They turned my office into a playroom. They even suggested that I move into the small room near the garage because the master bedroom would be better for their family. Still, I said nothing. I told myself that sacrifices were part of being a parent, but hearing the word leech changed something inside me. I stood up and quietly said, "You're right, things do need to change." Vanessa smiled, believing I had finally accepted their demands. Daniel nodded. "Good. We're glad you understand." I walked to my room, closed the door, and sat alone for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was review my bank accounts. For nearly 6 years, I had been paying most of their expenses through automatic transfers. Their mortgage payment, insurance, internet phone bills, and several credit card payments came directly from my account. They had become so used to the money that they no longer noticed it. The next morning, I canceled every automatic payment. Then I called my financial advisor. "I want to review everything connected to my son." I told him. He was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Over the next few days, I discovered that I had spent more than $420,000 supporting Daniel and his family. I had never kept track because I believed love should not come with receipts, but now I understood something painful. Generosity without boundaries can teach people to feel entitled. A week later, Daniel came home from work looking angry. "Mom, did you cancel the mortgage payment?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you said I was living off you. I didn't want to be a burden." "That's not what we meant." It sounded very clear to me. Vanessa walked into the room. "You can't just stop paying. We depend on that money." I looked at her calmly. "You told me I needed to become independent. I took your advice." Their faces changed. For the first time, they understood that the person they called a leech had been holding their entire life together. Daniel raised his voice. "You're punishing us." "No," I replied. "I'm respecting your wishes." They argued for nearly an hour. They reminded me of my granddaughter. "They said I was destroying the family." Vanessa cried and accused me of being selfish, but I had listened to those words for years whenever I tried to say no. This time I remained silent. 2 days later, I contacted a real estate agent. "I want to sell the house," I said. The agent was surprised. "The house is beautiful and the market is strong. But your son's family lives there." "I know. Have you spoken with them?" "Not yet. The house had increased greatly in value. Selling it would give me enough money to travel, move somewhere peaceful, and finally live the life I had postponed for everyone else." The agent arranged an inspection. When Daniel found out, he stormed into my room. "You're selling the house?" "Yes." "You can't do that." "Why not?" "Because we live here." "You live here because I allowed you to." "This is our home." "No." I said it is my home. The room became silent. Daniel stared at me with anger, but beneath it I saw fear. For years he had believed my support was permanent. He never imagined that I might one day choose myself. You're going to make your own son homeless. He asked no. I'm giving you 90 days to find another place. 90 days isn't enough. It was enough time for you to call me a leech. He turned away and slammed the door. That night I heard Daniel and Vanessa arguing downstairs. They blamed each other. They blamed me. They complained that life was unfair. Not once did they apologize. The house was listed the following week. Suddenly Daniel became kind. He brought me flowers. Vanessa offered to cook dinner. They asked if I wanted to spend more time with my granddaughter. But I could feel the difference between love and fear. They were not afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing what I provided. The house sold quickly. The buyers offered more than the asking price, and I accepted. As the moving day approached, Daniel finally sat beside me. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know things got out of control." I waited. "I shouldn't have called you a leech." "No," I said. "You shouldn't have. I was stressed." We are all stressed sometimes. That doesn't give us permission to disrespect the people who help us. He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." For a moment I wanted to forgive everything immediately. He was still my son. I remembered holding him when he was a baby. I remembered working extra shifts to buy his first bicycle. I remembered sitting beside his hospital bed when he was sick. But forgiveness did not mean returning to the same life. "I accept your apology," I told him. "But my decision remains." He looked shocked. "You're still leaving?" "Yes." "Where will you go?" "I haven't decided." That was the first time in years that I felt excited about the future. I rented a small apartment near the coast while I looked for a permanent home. It was quiet, bright, and close to the ocean. Every morning I walked along the beach. I read books. I joined a gardening group. I met people who knew me as Eleanor, not as Daniel's mother, not as the person who paid everyone's bills, but simply as myself. For months, Daniel barely contacted me. Then one evening I received a message. "Mom, can we talk?" I agreed. He arrived alone. He looked tired. "We're struggling." He admitted, "I'm sorry. I thought you would come back and fix everything." "I know, but you didn't." "No." He sat quietly. "Why?" "Because every time I fixed your problems, you learned that you didn't have to face them." He nodded slowly. "I understand now." Daniel told me he had taken a second job. Vanessa had returned to work. They had moved into a smaller apartment and started paying their own bills. "It's hard," he said. "Yes. But I feel proud," he added. That surprised me for the first time. He was building something without expecting me to carry the weight. Our relationship did not return to what it had been. It became something different, healthier. He called to ask how I was, not whether I could send money. He visited because he missed me, not because a bill was due. And when my granddaughter hugged me and said, "Grandma, I like your new home," I smiled. "So do I told her. People often believe that love means giving everything, until there is nothing left. But love without respect becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without boundaries becomes resentment. I did not cancel the payments because I hated my son. I canceled them because I finally understood that helping someone should not require losing yourself. I sold the house because it was no longer a home. I left town because I needed space to remember who I was. And in the end, leaving did not destroy my family. It forced all of us to grow. My son learned responsibility. My daughter-in-law learned that kindness should never be confused with weakness. And I learned that choosing myself was not selfish. It was necessary. The day I drove away, I looked in the rear-view mirror one last time. The house was getting smaller behind me. For years I had believed that my life was inside those walls. But as the road opened ahead, I realized something: my life had never been the house. My life was waiting for me beyond it.